So, the introduction. Leader, local guy, regional impact, TV star, in magazines, young guy, but a deep thinker, broad thinker, and one who's got a big heart and who cares deeply about this region. He's the was the managing partner at Reed Smith, has recently made a move over to be CEO and co-managing partner at Dilworth, a venerable law firm in Philadelphia. As I said, a deep thinker, and an honor and a pleasure to introduce a friend of mine, Ajay Raju.
I know what you're thinking.
Don't be dazzled by the thing.
I won't. I know what you're thinking. Why is a guy who's a walking environmental disaster talking at a sustainability conference? And I realize that I do abuse hair products. And if I took a dip into a regular-sized pool, proportionately, that would be like a BP oil spill. So I'm not here as an expert. I'm certainly not here as a peer. But I am here as one among millions who are inspired by your work and the ingenuity that you bring to the table. So I only have two really important messages that I want to give you. One is why it's important that you're doing the work in Philadelphia. And by the way, talk about ignorance. I thought you guys were from all over the world who came in here, not originally located in Philadelphia. But why is it important that we're having this conversation, one, in Philadelphia, and number two, why it's important for you to not only have this conversation amongst yourselves, but with people like me, those who have a heavy thumb on the scale of decision-making within companies, but really don't have any idea about the tools that are needed to conserve, the tools that are needed to have a real conversation on sustainability. And I think it's important to have that conversation, not amongst yourself, but also with people like me, who really need the help. And I'll explain why a conversation with Brad Minotsky really changed the course for my former firm, Reed Smith, in terms of our new lease that we entered into just a few months ago. So first topic, which is why is it important that you're doing the work here, and why it is important as a region to have thought leaders like you do things that transform and create inflection points within humanity. So if you'll bear with me, a little bit of history lesson in a context. Let me get to the point with a turnabout way. When you think about important milestones in history, if you go back and say, what are the important things that moved humanity forward, whether it's in terms of progress, whether it's population growth, if you start from early point, whether it is the harnessing of fire, to agriculture, farming, domestication of pets, dogs, bulls, horses, to warfare, tribals, to creation of small tribe and communities, to philosophers, probably the greatest period being 400 BC when you had Socrates and Confucius and Buddha in India, to religions, to the written word, symbol, right? You all have those lists. The printing press. All of these were important milestones in history, but if you look at a chart where you think about anthropological progress on one end and population growth on the other end, it was relatively flat. These things happened, and they were important to us now looking back, but virtually the changes were subtle. They weren't that important in the long arc of history until about 300 years ago, and an important inflection point happened, and it happened suddenly, and it happened quickly, and it bent the curve of history 90 degrees straight up. And that was the Industrial Revolution. That was the beginning of assembly lines, the steam engine, railways, mass transport. Information became global. What started in Europe moved east and west. And that was the beginning when humanity learned how to use technology to replace muscle power, to replace animal power. And we learned how to propel our progress forward exponentially. Of course, the byproduct of that exponential growth was also soot-filled London skies, air pollution, waste of resources, the precious resources that we all depend on energy. That went hand in hand. But that was the first revolution. People who lived it during that time probably did not realize that the world was changing. The modern society as we know it was being formed in a real way because of steam engines. They didn't know it at that time when they lived it. Today we understand how significant that time was. Fast forward to where we are today. 100 years from now, when people look back, historians write about this moment, they will say that this was yet another inflection point, and even more important inflection point than the Industrial Revolution, when technologies no longer just supplement muscle power and animal power, but are now doing what humans thought was only a province of what we did, which is technology is taking over cognitive function, judgment. Things that were only part of science fiction are now becoming reality. We're on the cusp of a dramatic new world where technologies are making decisions for us and making things binary, on, off. Innovators who are changing the world. That's happening now. Back in the 80s, Morgan Freeman drove Miss Daisy. Today, Google's autonomous cars can drive Morgan Freeman without a driver. You have Google autonomous cars that have no blind spots, but are aware of everybody else's blind spots on the road. No accidents. Over 5,000 drives in busy highways, 0 accidents. When you think about what does that mean to various professions? Well, 16% of accounting jobs are gone because TurboTax can do it for $39.99. Efficiently, without mistakes, and you don't have to wait for an appointment during 9 to 5 hours on Monday to Friday. You can be in your pajamas at 2 in the morning and you can get your taxes done for $39.99. Remember the supercomputer Watson? IBM's Watson that beat the champs at Jeopardy? Computers having enough cognitive function back then, we thought it was impressive, but it didn't make that much news. They could change the world by at least beating Jeopardy champions at their own games. Well, Watson is now in medical school, is digesting every bit of medical data and can spit out a medical diagnosis and a treatment plan more consistently, more effectively than doctors can. Judgment, cognitive functions, which we thought was our province, technologies are doing it. It takes approximately 167 hours per week for a typical doctor to keep track with the latest in medical technology. For computers, probably seconds. So what does that mean? One, that technology is at a point in our world where sustainability, conservation, et cetera, can be a binary on-off process. We can create technology that become guardrails where you don't have to wait for people like me to make the right decision. It is made for us. When I walk out of the room, I don't have to decide to shut the light off. It shuts it off for me because of the great ingenuity that you guys have come up with, which are sensors. So that's an innovation. You are sitting here, the next autonomous Google cars for sustainability is going to be created by folks like you. And that's why it's important that you have this conversation in Philadelphia. Why is it important for us as a region? It mattered back in the old days that we had a port. It mattered back in the old days that New York and others had a concentration of the infrastructure that made them great cities. Today, the hunt for every large city is talent. It is innovation. Those entrepreneurs who are changing the world. 4 or 5 people, and it doesn't have to be big companies. Look, we love the Comcasts of the world. We would love to have 20 GMs headquartered here, but it is not just about them anymore. They're important, but it's not just about them anymore. Remember, GM, at its peak, when it was the largest company in the world, had 600,000 employees. And then Apple took over. Apple became the largest company. At its peak, 55,000 employees. 2 weeks ago, Facebook paid $18 billion for a company with 55 employees. Instagram, with 16 employees, valued at $1 billion, put Kodak out of business. 2 or 3 people. You can transform the world. People are doing it in the technology area. You can do it in environmental conservation. And we want that to be here. We want Philadelphia to be the Ellis Island for future innovative companies. And the guy standing in front of, on top of City Hall, let that be our Statue of Liberty. So that's the message. The first message is why it's important that you're doing it in Philadelphia. Grow here. If we're not providing the infrastructure, we're the foot soldiers, those who are engaged in the region. We believe in you, and we want to see innovation born out of here. Now, to a more practical message of why it's also important to talk to guys like me. So for me, I will say it feels a lot like, being invited to a dinner with schmucks, and I'm still waiting for the schmucks to walk in. I realize I'm the schmuck, but I'm learning. I am a fast learner, and I will take credit for what Brad said in his introduction. When Brad and I met, we've known each other for a long time, but met for dinner over a cigar dinner, and we didn't eat cigar, we smoked it. But when we met for a dinner, Brad's goal at that point was, because he is general counsel of Brandywine. At that point, I was representing Reed Smith, my former firm, and we were about to reset on our lease. We had 30 years to look forward to, and we're trying to decide which building we would go to. We had narrowed it down to Brad's building. And Brad's, I think the agenda, even though he'll never admit it, was to really brainwash me and educate me in a very subtle way. And sometimes Brad can be subtle. I know it's hard for you to believe, but he can be. So during dinner, he started talking about NRDC. Never heard of NRDC. He started teaching me about how clustered tenants in dense areas like commercial buildings, how we are the largest consumers of energy, and also we make the largest impact, positive and negative, in terms of environment. It didn't register with me. My sense of narcissism was focused on my own points that I wanted to make. But then it was after dinner that I started thinking about it, and I realized the lease negotiation that we're about to enter into, although the business points are important, the legal points are important, it was also a moment where we were looking at 30 years from that point on, where our employees were going to be hostage to the decisions and the lack of information that I and others had about the environment that they would be part of, the air quality, the amount of energy that they would conserve. And at that moment, in an act of humility, which is rare for me, I said, I need help. Let's do something with NRDC. With Brad's help, with Wendy Falk, I think she's here somewhere, with NRDC, we invited Wendy over, who educated me within one lunch. I fell in love the moment they started talking about what NRDC does, the agenda for NRDC, and I was hooked. And for me, we decided at that moment, which most law firms don't like to engage in case studies or be partners in these things because external scrutiny is something that we fight very hard against. But I believe we were the first law firm globally to partner with NRDC. We believed in it. I think it was a smart move. It resulted in at least $2 million worth of savings in the long run for Reed Smith. And I'm proud of the decisions that they ultimately made with the partnership with NRDC. But for us, there were three things that I started focusing on when we started thinking about the lease. Dollars and cents, health and wellness, branding. Dollars and cents. Every decision we made had to impact our stakeholders. So that meant taking less space, creating a community environment as opposed to a commuter environment. In a law firm, having cross-selling matters. It impacts the bottom line. Making sure that we had glass walls so that we conserve more, we use less energy. Making sure that we implemented these binary on-off systems where sensors would shut off lights so we didn't have to depend on people doing the right thing. All of these things mattered in terms of dollars and cents, which was important. And let's face it, very important. Second was health and wellness. The right thing to do. Let's face it, these employees and colleagues, once you sign these leases, are essentially hostages, in some cases 9 to 5, and in most cases for law firms, 7 to 10 o'clock at night. So the air they breathe, the furniture that they have, whether it's ergonomic, whether it impacts their back, the food choices that they have, ultimately all impact health and wellness. Again, the glass wall, sunshine should not be exclusive province of the corner office. It belongs to everybody. So having that glass wall was not just about environment, it was also about the mood that you set, the morale that you create within the hallways, and making sure that the sunshine filters through, even if it's a carbon copy from the corner office to the hallways. It matters. It creates a brighter spot. It makes people happier. It's important. Those were the health reasons. But again, impacts dollars and cents. And then branding. There was a sense of arrogance that we believed in, which was Reed Smith, being a global law firm, had at least the alpha position to do something that would inspire others. through example, we will also set a new course for companies to rethink about their lease decisions and have this conversation about sustainability, have the conversation about conservation up front before we made the decisions. But even that ultimately benefits dollars and cents. So I could have just had one thing, which is dollars and cents, which really does mean health and wellness, also means branding. Ultimately, the right thing to do is also the smart thing to do. The great work that you're doing, we're really proud. We and millions others benefit from your ingenuity, your creativity. I'm grateful that this conversation is happening at Temple, my old stomping grounds, but back in undergrad and law school. And we're here to support you, and more importantly, I'm here and others like me are here to learn from you and to have these conversations that Brad was talking about, the two-way conversation. So thank you very much for your time and attention.